So good afternoon, Professor Kuo. Welcome to Cambridge.
Thank you. I really enjoy it.
Good. So you're here this afternoon to talk about Chinese perspectives of beauty and of happiness
Right.
at the Darwin Lecture Series. So, and their relationship to Chinese ideas of spirituality and cultural ideas in China. So, what these underlying ideas of Chinese spirituality? One could include Taoism. And say Confucianism. So could you tell us a little bit about the ideas behind Taoism?
Yes, I think in today's lecture, I will probably focus on Taoist ideas about beauty and happiness because even though Confucianism has been very important in Chinese history, Taoism was very important to the making of art and literature, and because Confucianism is more concerned with individuals' relationship to society and to the relationship among families, and Taoism uh, tends to focus on how one can be happy without regard to a lot of these values imposed upon individual by either the family or the state. And Taoism developed very interesting ideas about, for example, how to conduct yourself in the society without regard to any political or moral pressure. So it's very important for a lot of Chinese, particularly the educated elite, to understand Taoism. And basically, there are two kinds of Taoism. One is called the philosophical Taoism. The other is called the religious Taoism. And I'm concerned more with the philosophical Taoism because even though in Chinese society Taoism eventually becomes organized religion, the philosophical Taoism is more a guide for uh, how to live as an individual. And in this case, I want to focus on how artists approach the making of art. For example, the most important element I will be talking about is the literary artist work. In their work, they train their hand and their mind so that in their work there is the relationship between their hand and their mind and their eye, so that art, in their view, is not to make a pretty picture of what you see with your eye, but rather an expression of your individual mind and your emotion. And so the imitation of nature becomes secondary. So unlike in a lot of Western artists, for example, Michelangelo is said to have strike his sculptor Moses because the sculpture does not talk. But that's the direct opposite of Chinese artists. They want to. The reason they make art is to make themselves happier, freer, rather than try to make something like a real person or real scenery.
Okay.
And so they are somewhat liberated from the need to imitate nature. And at the same time, their body and their mind can be liberated from not only having to imitate nature, which is impossible to do, but at the same time, they were able to cultivate their own mind and their spirit so that they don't make separation between art and non-art. So that's a very key element, is that art to the Chinese Taoist elite is not something that you make to be put on stand, but rather it's part of your life.
Yeah.
And it's much of a play. So as long as that is taken into consideration, then as an artist, you are not restricted by the need to make colorful paintings or realistic sculpture, but rather something that you can express your mood or your feeling. And so sometimes colors are not important. Like a lot of Chinese art, particularly calligraphy, has no color except it's black. But within the black category, they can experiment different kind of shades, and also in a lot of Chinese painting, it's all ink. So again, color is not important. So the important is how you organize the picture, how different parts of the picture fit together, and more importantly, how the picture capture the essence of the artist's perception of nature.
Yeah. So it's all about the artist. The art is a tool for the artist to feel free, to feel happy, and not a recreation of nature.
Right.
That's
right.
Okay. How about something I've heard a little bit about from you is the idea of spontaneity in the pursuit of happiness in Chinese culture. What can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, the idea of spontaneity again is connected to the idea of making art that is not restricted by having to imitate nature. Therefore, the spontaneity comes from a free mind and a free hand, and the artist is supposed to cultivate his mind so that whenever he does a work of art, it's kind of natural, coming from a very spontaneous, immediate, even very quick manner. A lot of Chinese work of art, like calligraphy and painting, will be done in a very short time. At the same time, you cannot go back and erase and correct what has been done. So it's at the same time it's very demanding because you cannot make any mistake.
No.
So, but at the same time, your painting or your calligraphy is simply an extension of your mind and hand. And so, in a way, if you are very good at doing this kind of art, you are, in essence, enjoying doing it.
Yeah.
You don't feel frustrated because that is a play. It's not. A lot of Chinese art is done not for money. So because a lot of artists are not in the market for money, because a lot of Chinese art work were given away as a present or as something to share with like-minded friends.
Because the joy had already been derived
by
the artist from doing the art.
Right. Okay. And the artist did not have to sign a contract. They did not have to cater to rich patrons or powerful patrons. That is the ideal way of being an artist in the Chinese elite.
Okay, so the two ideas of one, the Chinese idea of art being fun because it's an expression of you, and then that is different. That does contrast with the idea of just drawing to try and imitate nature. So these are two different ideas. What do you think? Perhaps Western cultures. Do you think there's anything to conclude that we could learn from this idea? Do you think perhaps we could try and emulate this spontaneity and derive some happiness from this?
Yes, I think in my lecture I'll be talking about at least two modern and contemporary artists. One is Picasso, and Picasso said that he said to an artist that had he been born a Chinese, he would be a calligrapher instead of a painter, because calligraphy does not imitate nature. It's all free flow form. It is not supposed to have any color or imitate nature, and therefore the artist, on one hand, are free to do whatever he wants, but on the other hand, it's very demanding because the limitation set by calligraphy is very big, because it's black and you need to do within certain convention, and it's within this limited convention that you must create your own individual style. So it's very challenging.
Yeah.
The other artist I will mention is the contemporary French artist Yves Klein, who was most famous for pouring paint to a nude model and show the model on a canvas and using the paint from the model's body as the basis and then touch up and to make a painting. And the other painting that he did was to take a canvas to along the river bank and let the wind blow the reed against the canvas and therefore making a painting. Essentially, without the conventional brush.
Yeah.
The third painting that he would do is to use fire and to put some pigment and mix its fire onto the canvas. But in the 9th century in China, we have record of Chinese artists doing exactly or more or less the same thing.
Okay.
There's a guy who would get drunk and would put his hair into the ink and then throw the hair onto the canvas, or he would have people jumping around on the canvas. So essentially, these artists, both Chinese and the French artists, were trying to get away from the imitation of nature, and they are trying to kind of release themselves from the limitation imposed, not only by art history but also by society. So that is to say, there's no set way of doing art, as well as there's no set way to be an individual, and therefore they can become freer, and consequently, hopefully, they'll be happier because they are now having achieved certain kind of not only artistic freedom, but spiritual freedom.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much for your time, Professor Kuo.
Thank you.